Hey out there, Akronites, welcome once again to Around Akron with Blue Green. On this episode, we're going to talk about raptors, or birds of prey. We're going to visit the MAPS Air Museum and check out some interesting military memorabilia. We're going to visit the Akron-Canton Airport and learn a little bit about its history. And to wrap this show up, we're going to talk to James Vaughan, an aerospace photo illustrator, and his work is literally out of this world. Now to kick this show off today, we're going to go talk to the Medina Raptor Center and learn all about birds of prey. We studied birds to make jets just like that. Let's go see what this place is all about.
A raptor is a bird that makes a living off of killing his food. They have talons, claws that are very sharp and powerful, and they have a beak that's pointed and curved for ripping and tearing. It's just a bird that can be very dangerous to a squirrel and to a rabbit, but since we know what we're doing, they're not dangerous to us. But I wouldn't suggest that anyone go out and try and make one as a pet. That is actually illegal in the state of Ohio as in the United States. They're the kind of a bird that needs to be handled in a certain way. We have big gloves that we handle these birds with. Eagles are raptors, hawks, owls, little falcons are raptors. There's all sorts of raptors in the world, but they aren't as common as a songbird. They were endangered and they were brought back, and basically the ODNR was responsible, as well as falconers all over the country. They kind of rose to the emergency situation that we had with peregrines. And peregrines like to, if they were in the wild, they would be nesting on a cliff. That's where they like to nest. And cliffs are perfect for peregrines, but we don't have cliffs in Ohio. Not as big as they would like. So what I think that the birds seem to have been doing in Ohio is they like our skyscrapers, they like the tall buildings. They find scrapes there where they can sit and have their eggs and nest, and then the babies can fly off. Very similar to the cliffs back out west.
The fastest animal on the planet. They've been clocked at 225, 250 miles an hour. So they will go straight up and dive straight down. You had mentioned earlier about finding the heads, or headless birds, or just finding the heads. For a long time, people thought that peregrines just didn't eat the heads of the birds that they were eating. But what they found out is they'll come down in that stoop and they'll actually kick their legs out and punch the birds so hard that the heads pop off. And so they were fine. But if the head doesn't pop off, they'll take it back to the nest and eat the head. But if it comes off, it comes off. There's not that much nutrients in the head, so they don't need to go chasing after it. They've got the rest of the bird body. So that's why you've got heads everywhere. Raptors, it depends on the size. And they're a little different than dogs. Birds are different than dogs in that the bigger the bird, the longer they tend to live because they're higher up the food chain. Whereas dogs, the bigger the dog, the shorter length of time they'll live. So the smaller birds tend to be, we had a screech owl that was 15 years old when he passed away, and he passed away from old age. And that's a pretty old screech owl. Great horned owls have been known to live 30 years. Some of the red-tailed hawks can get up there 20, 25 years. We had an eagle come in that was banded from a different state that was 25 years old. There was just an article about the oldest eagle ever banded had passed away from lead poisoning in a different state. But I think that bird was probably 40 years old. Peregrines are a little different though, because they are a very aggressive bird. And if they migrate away from their nest territory in the winter, when they come back, they usually have to fight for their territory. So we don't see as many peregrine falcons here at the center because by the time they get to us, they're so badly injured that they die, or we don't find them because they die out in the cities because they have to fight for their territory. Most of the injuries that we do see from them, they're not the car strikes like the red-tailed hawks, they are territory battles. They will, we've had females that will chase each other into buildings, that will throw each other into the buildings because they're flying so fast and so hard just to defend their own territory.
A lot of the raptors will nest in their tree cavities. And that brings up another point that I would like to mention, is every year we have birds brought to us because of the fact that they have cut down a tree. People have cut down trees. They cut them down in the spring. These little screech owl babies are in there. Barred owl babies are in the cavity nests. And, you know, so a lot of them die because the tree is cut down and they don't find them. So what I'd like to say is please don't cut trees during the spring, and cut them, if you're going to cut a tree, do it in the winter time or another time when they're not nesting and you know, having their young, because that's a really sad thing for us to have to deal with those babies. They're much better off raised by their own parents.
Next up, we're here at MAPS, the Military Aviation Preservation Society Air Museum. Now, words just can't describe. Let's go see what this place is all about.
Well, it was 1990. 14 members decided they weren't satisfied with the organization they were in and wanted to start a new aviation organization here at the Akron-Canton Airport. They originally had one bay in our restoration building, and they started with just that one bay and one aircraft. Well, we've grown significantly, but that's where they started, with 14 members. When you walk through that set of glass doors into the hangar, it turns us all into 10-year-old kids. There's no two ways about it. You're just sort of awed by what you see in the hangar. Now, we'll have a number of people, World War II vets or Korean War vets, that flew in these airplanes. We had one that flew the B-26 here that we let him climb in the seat. He was a pilot. And you could just see him, his eyes glaze over, and he was back in that seat again. And that's special for us as well, letting those people remember what it was like. We're losing the World War II generation all too quickly, and whatever we can do to make them happy is what we do here. Well, probably the center of our collection is this B-26 here in the museum, because that's one of 7 left in the world today. And because of the story of that airplane, and it's more than the airplanes, it's the stories. It's the people that flew them, it's the people that dreamed about aviation and flying, it's the people that designed them. So it's not just the physical airplane sitting here. We have an airplane in the back corner that I get kidded a lot about. It's called an OQ-2A radio plane. Well, there's some links from that airplane to a young Army captain in World War II by the name of Ronald Reagan, and a young 18-year-old girl who was found assembling those airplanes by the name of Norma Jean Dougherty, who later became known probably more famously as Marilyn Monroe. So it's those kinds of stories. In the Gallery of Heroes, those guys are all local boys, local men and women. They're not the guys you read about in history books. That's what people come here. It's the local people, the local stories, the stories about the airplanes. And that's where the links, the tour guide, bring the links together. Well, right now we have 2 display rooms, and we're working on 3 more upstairs that we'll have within the next 2 years. The first one was what we call the Gallery of Heroes, which is our display room. Everything in there is original, everything in there has been donated, everything from World War I memorabilia up through modern day flight suits. There's actually a piece of the USS Arizona as part of the Pearl Harbor display in there. So MAPS is actually classified as a war memorial because of that one artifact. Now, last year, there was a museum in Massillon called the Ohio Military Museum who went out of business, lost their building. So we have assimilated their collection upstairs. So there's another display room up there, primarily not aviation related, but military related. memorabilia, including a number of displays honoring local men and women that were awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor, anything from the Civil War on up through current time. We have pretty much the history of modern aviation. Above our heads here is a 1908 Martin glider, which was designed and built and flown by a local farmer by the name of William Martin. So we have the original airplane that he first flew in January of 1909. Now the second pilot of that airplane was his wife. She flew it first in April of 1909, and she basically was the first female aviator of a heavier-than aircraft in the world, right here in Canton, Ohio, in April of 1909. And that's about 5 years after the Wright brothers' first flight, so we weren't on the leading edge. And the newest airplane we have is an F-16 Fighting Falcon, which is undergoing restoration here to my right. They're working on sanding it to be painted right now. And pretty much everything in between, World War I, World War II, Korea, right up on through. Well, we have a group that comes in, and they're coming back in August, 11, 12, 13 August, called the Collings Foundation. And they are an organization that puts back together aircraft that are flyable. And annually, and we're a good stop for them, they will fly in a World War II B-17 Flying Fortress, a B-24 Liberator, a B-25 Mitchell bomber, and a P-51 Mustang. And for the weekend, they'll be parked right outside the hangar. And as you're aware, certain people will get a chance to fly in them. For the media, they do the media flight, and other than that, you can purchase a flight in a World War II vintage bomber. But it's just a nice place to come. In fact, this entire Akron-Canton area, if you talk about the McKinley Museum, if you talk about the Pro Football Hall of Fame, if you talk about the First Ladies, we have we don't talk about it much, but there's a chocolate factory on the other side of the airport that people will make a day out of it. They'll go half day to the chocolate factory and come here for half a day. We tell people plan, legitimately on at least 2 hours to see what we've got right now. And as we improve this facility, the tour is going to get a little longer. So you might be a couple days here.
Next up, we're at the Akron-Canton Airport, and we're going to learn a little bit about the history of this place and what those things right there are all about.
I think everybody, when they see an airplane go over their head, stops and looks up. There is something about that that just is captivating. And it doesn't matter what age you are. I've been here for 36 years, and I can see airplanes take off and land every day, and I'm still in awe of it when I watch it. Well, the Akron-Canton Airport actually opened in 1946, so we are now 72 years old. And before that, this was just a bunch of farmland. We were out in the middle of virtually nowhere, and the surrounding towns and cities have kind of grown towards us over these last 70 years. But it was farmland owned by several different individuals. The story that I'm told, and one of our board members was the son of one of our founding fathers, Fred Wilkins. He was an avid aviator, and he was working with Henry H. Timken at the time to find a spot for a permanent airport here in Northeast Ohio. Akron-Fulton was the airport of the time, but it was down in the bowl, as everybody knows, down by the rubber bowl. And that wasn't really conducive to some of the aircraft that was coming out in that time. So Mr. Wilkins went up in his airplane and was looking around. This was one of the highest points between the two counties. It actually sits astride the county lines. And so this was the spot that they chose when they started to do the process of trying to build this facility. Air travel has changed a lot. As we all know, it was all turboprop aircraft when the facility was built in the late 40s. And into the early 50s, we had jet traffic. Modern jets start to come on board in the 60s, the early 60s through the mid 60s. And so there has been a lot of change, and a lot of the changes that have happened here at the facility have come to accommodate some of those. So for instance, longer runways were needed to accommodate those jet aircraft and being able to land and take off and go where they wanted to go. So our runways have been lengthened several times. The terminal building initially was an old metal building. I'm not sure if it was an old barracks or what, but it was an old metal building that they used for the terminal building originally in 1948. In 1962, the facility that we're in today opened, but since that time there have been many, many modifications. The core of the facility is still the same, but the rest of the facility has all been updated so that we can accommodate today's traveler's experience. It was before the interstate was here that we were actually built, but I think it was also halfway about between the two downtown areas, Akron and Canton. But we were actually formed by the two counties, Stark and Summit. Although we take the name of the two major cities in each county, we're actually formed by Stark and Summit counties. So we were a shared service, if you will, before that was a cool term, because we've been that way ever since we were formulated. The story that I've been told, and I can't tell you whether this is true or not, I'm kind of the airport historian. After you've been here so long, you kind of end up being the airport historian. But the story I am told is that I-77 originally was not scheduled to come here. It was scheduled to follow 21, which is over on the west side of Stark County and up into Summit County. Henry Timken of the Timken Company was as I mentioned earlier, was one of our founding fathers. And the story I've heard is that he went down to Washington, D.C. and made sure that it came through Canton and came up this way past the airport and then into downtown Akron. So that made it a lot more convenient for travelers to get here and helped us with our growth over all these years. Our runways here are 150 feet wide. Our long runway is 8,204 feet long. That's like paving 1.5 miles of a 20-lane highway when you pave it. So when you pave a runway, it is a huge job, and of course we can't have potholes out there. So we maintain our pavements here with through a very strict and stringent program on a regular basis. It's because you want to make that pavement last as long as possible, but again, you can't have a pothole out in the middle of a runway. So maintaining the pavement here is a huge undertaking, but our team here does a great job and really makes sure that this airport is safe at all times. We have about $500 million in annual economic impact to Northeast Ohio. Over 3,000 jobs are created because the airport is here. And I have to be real frank that with the oil and gas industry that's coming here in southern and western or eastern Ohio, the Pro Football Hall of Fame village, we will become more of a destination, and that impact will become bigger and bigger. So as we move forward, that's one of the things that's my job and our team's job here, is to make sure that we position this facility to be able to take advantage of those opportunities when they come. I don't have the crystal ball. I wish I did, but I don't. But I do know that we can do certain things here to be ready for that, and that's really what we focused on as we've grown over these last 8 years that I've been in charge.
And to wrap this show up, we're going to talk to James Vaughan, an aerospace photo illustrator, and his work is literally out of this world.
I was inspired by the great illustrators of the 1950s and the 1960s. I'm trying to return that favor and inspire a new generation of explorers and supporters. I can't think of another way to call it except the poetic side, the artistic side of space exploration has actually always been part of the presentation. Whether you watch a 1950s film from the Air Force or a 1960s film from General Dynamics about building this latest booster, there's always a part of it that's about the song and the thirst to explore and go beyond our limits and go into this amazing, frightening, awesome place called outer space. Bigger, better, more. That's what space is about. That's what the space program is about. Our modern world has come a lot from the space program. Our phones today have more computer power than all of the computers NASA had in 1969 for the moon landing. And that's a result of the space program. Satellites, our television, our ability to forecast the weather, it goes on and on and on. We are living in the space age today. We all live in outer space. It's our neighborhood. There are most certainly resources out in space that vastly outstrip what we have here on the Earth. We don't want to use up everything we have here, but what will it be like when we have asteroids that have unlimited amounts of what we call rare earth elements that are very hard and very rare here on Earth, but very plentiful, say, out in the asteroid belt or on another planet. And once we figure out a way to mine those and refine them, we can just give them a little push and they can come back to Earth at their leisurely time, and we'll have all these resources. It's the early part of any technological frontier that's hard to foresee and understand the profits that are going to be made. First, you have to build the Panama Canal, which is a lot of work, a really big ditch to build. But then, for the next 100 years, your ships get to go through the Panama Canal and you make lots of money. There's always people that don't care one way or another about space exploration. It was that way back in the 1960s. There were a lot of people when we landed on the moon that said, okay, big deal, who cares? That's okay. Not everybody has a vision. Not everybody has an imagination. Not everybody needs to go into outer space. That doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. There are always people that say, why can't we stay here on Earth and solve our problems here on Earth? Why are we going into outer space? I always say, let's do both. There's no reason, one is not mutually exclusive of the other. We can do both. We can solve our problems here on Earth and we can explore outer space. We have to explore outer space because it's there. I mean, are we just going to ignore it for the rest of our history? That doesn't make any sense. That kind of doesn't even seem doable. These distances, which we find really a long way now and a long time. I mean, stop and think about what it was like to cross the Atlantic Ocean a couple hundred years ago. It took months and they relied on wind. And sometimes they didn't even know where they were going. So a couple hundred years from now, these distances may not be anything like we conceive of them today. I expect that that's the way it'll be. I expect that in 100 years, we will have star travel. We will have travel that with manageable amounts of time in between us and other stars and star systems and their planets. we use our common sense and we look backwards, we see that 100 years ago, most of us didn't have electricity. Most of us did not have indoor plumbing. Television, radio, that sort of stuff was magic. I mean, it wasn't even conceived of. So now if we look only 100 years into the future, there will be technological jumps and leaps that we can hardly conceive of now. This is the early period. It's sort of the Model T period. It's hard work. It takes a lot of tools. But 100 years from now, things will be very different.
Thank you for watching yet another episode of Around Akron with Blue Green. Now, if you have an idea for a segment or you just want to say hey, you can reach out on the website at www.aroundakronwithbluegreen, or you can reach me on social media on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We'll see you next time on Around Akron with Blue Green.